Hello, everyone. This is Professor DePaulo. Welcome you back to Psych 265 online. And today I'm going to walk you through how to write the discussion section. So, all of this information is posted as always under the Assignments tab. We're going to go into Assignments. And as you can see here, I've posted results and the discussion. So, the results I've done for you. You do not need to do any of that. So, I've analyzed the data and tested all 5 of our hypotheses. And I've written up the results section for you. All you have to do is copy and paste it into the final paper. So the results go into the final paper right after the method section, and you're going to just copy and paste it, and that's it. So here's our results section. You'll want to put the word results at the top here. That's the only thing I didn't put there for you. So just type in the word results. Spelled it wrong, obviously. And then that'll be centered. All right. And so empathy, so I'm testing the 5 hypotheses here. So empathy was not positively correlated with mask wearing. The correlation is positive, but it's not significant because the p-value is not less than 0.05. So that p-value has to be less than 0.05 for you to have a statistically significant result, which is what we want. And this is not even close to 0.05, it's 0.443. So we're going to say that empathy was not correlated with mask wearing, which is a bit of a surprise because in the previous semester using the study, we did find a correlation between empathy and mask wearing. So the big problem with the way we gathered the data and the way we're testing our hypotheses is there were only 23 participants total, which means that it's going to be extremely difficult to find results. I would want to have 1 to 200 at least participants in order to have a realistic chance to test these hypotheses. With 23 participants, we're really at a severe disadvantage, and you're going to see this in the results section. So there was no correlation between empathy and mask wearing. Individuals with high levels of empathy did not wear masks more than with those in low levels of empathy. So we expected that if you were high in empathy, you relate to other people, you could put yourself in their shoes, take their perspective. That might help you wear masks. Other research has shown that to be the case. Previous semester showed that to be the case, but this semester there was no relationship. Once again, 23 subjects, that's a problem. Now, as far as our second hypothesis, there was no difference in empathy between those choosing to get the vaccine and those not getting the vaccine. So this result is sort of going in the right direction, but once again, we have a really small sample, so we couldn't find a significant relationship there. There was also no significant correlation between health anxiety and fear of future pandemics. It's a pretty small correlation there. However, one sort of result that we didn't hypothesize that showed up was that fear of future pandemics was related to attachment anxiety and neuroticism. So that's kind of interesting that health anxiety really didn't contribute to the fear of what's going to happen in the future, but it was more attachment anxiety. And that kind of makes sense because if you have attachment anxiety, you're worried about your loved ones, your significant other, your partner. You do not want them to leave you. And the pandemic was really difficult because there was so much unknown. We were so afraid that, friends, family, loved ones would get sick. And that was the main fear, right? That we experienced. We all experienced this. And it looks like this attachment related anxiety, this kind of fear that your partner will leave you, is related to this fear of future pandemics. So it's not just about your own health, it's also about your relationship. So even though we didn't specify that as a hypothesis in our study, that was a adjacent finding, which makes sense. And the same thing with neuroticism. So if you're high in neuroticism, which is a personality trait, you tend to worry about things, and therefore you're going to worry about pandemics happening in the future. So the idea that health anxiety does not relate to the fear of future pandemics It could mean that basically people are not really worried about their own health, but they're worried about the health of their loved ones more so, which could be an interesting finding. Even though I didn't specify that as a hypothesis, we saw that in the results nonetheless. Now let's move on from that. Examining the relationship between depression and loss of family and friends, there was no significant relationship. So there was no relationship between depression and loss of family and friends. So people that lost family and friends didn't have greater levels of depression than people that didn't lose family and friends. And once again, we don't know exactly why that's the case. If people lost, family that they were not close with, or friends that were, not really strong friends, just kind of casual acquaintances, that would affect, uh, people differently in terms of depression than if they lost significant family members. So I'm not sure, when I say family and friends, that could be a lot of different things. And, I think you would see more depression among people that lost very close friends or very close family members. But we didn't kind of separate that out in the study. There was also not a relationship here between generalized anxiety and loss of family and friends. That was a really weak relationship. There was nothing there at all. And there was no relationship between desire for family and friends to be vaccinated and attachment anxiety. And I would think you would see more of that because you saw the fear of future pandemics with attachment anxiety, but you're not seeing here with vaccination attachment anxiety. Maybe because we're not focusing on partners, like romantic partners. Maybe that would lead to a better result. So there's a lot of reasons why we didn't get the results that we wanted to get. The biggest reason is the small sample size. But a couple other reasons where the questions might have been a bit vague with regard to, maybe it should have been more specifically about, romantic partners. I did not put anything about romantic partners in here, and it looks like I should have. So that's good to know, and that's kind of why we run these pilot studies so that we can test things out and see what works and what doesn't work. And it looks like the family and friends issue, we didn't get much with that. But if I would have put romantic partners in there, maybe we would have gotten some other things because you saw the attachment anxiety correlation before. So, it is what it is. It's a good pilot study. We didn't find everything that we wanted to find, but it can help us build on and make better research in the future. So if I want to design a full study, these results are helpful to know what doesn't work and what could work. So those are the results. You just have to copy and paste them into your final paper. That's it. Let's go back to the discussion guide. So now that we went through the results, let's look at the discussion. So I want the word discussion centered, non-bold, non-italics, regular font, 12-point font, 1-inch margins, standard margins. There's 4 paragraphs for the discussion. And I want you to follow this format. With the introduction, some people followed the format I gave them, and other people said, okay, I'm going to write whatever I want. And it generally doesn't work that way. Please follow the format that I provide you, even if you disagree with it. Because I'm trying to simplify things and I'm giving you instructions, you need to follow the instructions. So I want 4 paragraphs here. The first paragraph, you're going to restate all 5 of the hypotheses that I gave you. That was in the last paragraph of the introduction. I want you to restate all these hypotheses, and in regular words, without statistics, I want you to talk about whether you support the hypotheses or not. And obviously, you didn't support them, any of them. So you're going to restate your hypotheses and then tell the audience what you found, which is basically you didn't support any of the 5 hypotheses. Do not use statistics in the discussion. So, like that first paragraph of the discussion is kind of like a review of the results. The results are laden with statistics, but the discussion is not. So, the discussion is easy to understand if you don't really want to read through the statistics. And a lot of students do not want to be bothered with the statistics, so they just want to read the discussion. So, what did we find? What are our hypotheses? This is paragraph 1. And you know, what do we find? We found that there was no relationship and we didn't support any of the hypotheses. So that's pretty basic because there was nothing good. If you want to mention that we found a correlation between attachment anxiety and fear of future pandemics, you could mention that. You don't have to because that's not what we exactly tested, but I put it in there because it's related. You could mention that too if you want. So that's paragraph one, just a summary of the results section. One paragraph summary of the results section without the statistics in it. Paragraph two, how do your findings relate to past research, especially the research you discussed in the introduction? So the introduction, the articles that you researched was supposed to be related to the 5 hypotheses that we're testing as a class. So how do our current results from the study we ran, which is basically we didn't support any of the 5 hypotheses, how do those results compare to previous research? Well, they're going to be different from previous research because a lot of the research showed a correlation between empathy and mask wearing. Some of the research showed a relationship between empathy and vaccination. So that previous research involving these hypotheses, which much of it should be in your introduction, right? You need to talk about, are our results similar or different to that previous research? In most cases, it's different. And if it's different, give me a reason why. And that moves into paragraph 3. So let me go back to paragraph 2. You want to cite the previous studies. So if you're comparing our results to previous results, make sure you cite the previous results. Author, comma, date. That's the citation. So we did not find a relationship between mask wearing and empathy. Previous research had found a relationship between mask wearing and empathy. So and so did a study and found this, and then give the citation. Right? That would be for mask wearing and empathy. And then if you wanted to do fear of future pandemics, previous research has, either they looked at it or they didn't look at it, has not looked at it, but they looked at something similar. And they found a relationship between anxiety and what happened during the pandemic, right? And then cite that study. So you want to go back through the hypotheses that we failed to support. Our research didn't work out the way we wanted it to work out, right? We expected, some significant findings. We found nothing. That happens. It especially happens when you only have 23 participants. So you want to explain why it's different, why our results maybe are not significant compared to the previous research. That's all. Is it the same? Is it different? And then, cite these previous research and cite that the previous research is different. That's all. So there should be citations in paragraph 2 because you're citing previous studies that looked at the same things we're looking at now as a class. Paragraph 3. If you fail to support your hypotheses, explain why. So in this paragraph, we're explaining why we didn't support our hypotheses. The limitations of the study. There are a lot of limitations. Small sample is probably the biggest one, small sample size. Other limitations could be that the study only included participants from the New York area. So maybe people in New York think differently about the pandemic than people in Florida or people in Texas or people in California. Is there something different about people in New York? Our sample was also, the majority of participants in our sample were also African American. So do African Americans think differently about the pandemic and the behaviors in the pandemic than other race and ethnicities? Possibly. We saw the research going on about how African Americans were more at risk for getting serious illness during COVID-19 for a variety of reasons. And so maybe they think differently about mask wearing. Maybe mask wearing is a serious thing. Maybe more serious than some people in the rest of the country or people from different backgrounds. Maybe it's not. I don't know. That's up for that's up for you to go and find the research. So we failed to support our hypotheses. There were limitations. Talk about those limitations: sample size, lack of race, diverse race and ethnicity. So our sample is primarily African American, which is great, but we couldn't really compare the different ethnicities because there weren't enough people from. There were only 23 people. The age range also, our sample is relatively younger. So do older people think differently and behave differently than younger people with regard to the pandemic? And then talk about internal or external validity. Internal validity is the ability to draw cause and effect conclusions. Our study is correlational, so it does not have internal validity. That's poor internal validity. We cannot draw cause and effect conclusions based on correlations, based on a survey. We did not run an experiment, so our internal validity is low or it's poor. And our external validity is the ability to generalize to the population. Our external validity is also poor. Once again, is our sample representative of the United States as a whole? Probably not. Is it representative of New York City? Maybe. Is it representative of New York State? Maybe not. So that has low external validity. Because if I take a sample of 23 people in, let's say I go to Texas, and I get a sample of 23 people, or I get a sample of 23 people in North Dakota, are they going to look like the 23 people in our class that completed the survey? Maybe, probably not, though. Probably not. Different political affiliation, different mixture of race, ethnicity, maybe different age range, but probably not. So the external validity is also kind of questionable. It doesn't mean that one sample is better than another. It doesn't mean that at all. It doesn't mean our sample is better than the sample taken in another part of the country. Ideally, I would like to have a large sample that was very diverse with regard to races, very diverse with regard to ages, very diverse with regard to gender. That's another issue with our study, our sample, is our sample was predominantly female. Once again, there's nothing wrong with that, but it limits our ability to draw inferences or generalizations because we have mostly a female sample. We have mostly an African American female sample, and that limits our ability to generalize to the entire population. And the best way to fix that, the easiest way to fix it, is increase your sample size. Because if you increase your sample size, you're going to get more men, you're going to get different ages, you're going to get different races. But we're using a convenience sample in our study, which basically means that you guys signed up for the class, and therefore I'm using you. Those aren't the best studies, right? It's like the convenience store. If you go to a convenience store, it's not like the best place to shop, but it's probably the place that's open late and it's convenient. All the other stores are closed, so you go to the convenience store and you overpay for things, but you get some stuff, right? And the same thing happens with a convenient sample. It's easy to get, it's convenient. I don't have to go out of my way to get it, but there's a trade off. It's not a random sample. And a random sample is better, it's more representative of the population than a convenient sample. But in psychology, we often use convenient samples because they are convenient. It's hard to do a random sample. It's very difficult and very costly. So most of our experiments are using convenient samples, and that limits our external validity. Now, what people could do is they could replicate studies. So if I ran a study with a small sample here in New York, someone could replicate it in another state. And if we get the same results, then that's great. That increases the generalizability of our findings. But psychology also has a replication problem. People don't replicate, or they fail to replicate. So we have to be really concerned with, how much can we generalize from our sample of 23 people that tend to be primarily female and primarily African American. I do not want to generalize and say, okay, we did this study, all college students see the world this way, see the pandemic this way. That would be a mistake. Now, if I had 200 people or 500 people or 1,000 or 5,000 people, I'd feel a lot better about generalizing the results. But I do not feel good with 23 people. So, in summary, the study that we ran has low internal validity because it's not an experiment, and we cannot draw cause and effect conclusions from a survey. And it also has low external validity because our sample is small and it's not representative of the general population. But it's better than nothing. And it's a pilot study, so it's okay, right? This is not a study that I would look to publish. This is a study that I would look to figure out, okay, what's going on here? Do I see any trends? What's a good question? What's not a good question? What could I ask? So right away, I already know from this pilot study we ran that if I'm going to run this again, I want to ask about romantic relationships, partners, rather than just family and friends, because that has a different meaning than just family and friends. So that's something I would include in the future. So that's paragraph 3. Paragraph 4, what are the real world implications of the results of the study? So based on our results, what can you draw about the pandemic in general? Well, I would like to say that empathy plays a role in whether you get vaccinated and whether or not you wear a mask, but it seems like it doesn't from our study. So is there a better way to get people vaccinated? There might be. I don't know. I mean, they're resorting to all kinds of gimmicks now. It's tickets to sporting events for vaccinations. It's beer for vaccinations. It's food for vaccine. I mean, it's like we'll give you anything we have for you to get vaccinated. Is that really the right way to go about getting people vaccinated? I don't know. No one knows. We haven't done this. I mean, we've done it with the flu shot, but like no one takes the flu vaccine seriously. Very few people even get the flu vaccine because they're like, oh, it's the flu. Who cares? Unless you're immunocompromised or you're older, you're not really worried about the flu. It's nasty if you get it, but it goes away. And you have the antiviral drugs, like Tamiflu, that can mask the symptoms. But when it came to COVID, it's a bigger deal, right? Because our society has completely shut down because of COVID, and people have died at a much higher rate than the flu, our standard flu. So now it's really important to get vaccinated, and what's stopping some people from getting vaccinated? So we thought empathy would play a role, and I still think it does, but we didn't find it in our study. So is there something else that we could look at? Is there something that we didn't look at in this study that you could look at in the future that could play a role in vaccinations, in social distancing and wearing masks? Because the goal here is to find a way to increase this health behavior, to protect people. Because there probably will be a future pandemic. At least everyone seems to think there will be another pandemic. Hopefully not in the same scale as COVID. Hopefully we learn our lessons. But in the future, we're going to need to know, how do we protect people? How do we get more people to wear masks? So the results we have are all, one little piece of the puzzle, but it's a piece. And it looks like empathy is not playing a big role in terms of health behavior and vaccination. It looks like health anxiety is not playing a big role in terms of people being afraid of future pandemics. So are there other things we could look at in the future that could play a role? Is there any other variable that we can measure? that might be important here. Because what we came up with didn't quite work out. But only, once again, only with 23 participants. Also, how would you address the limitations of the study if you were conducting future research? Well, there's plenty of ways you can address it. And the simplest way is increase sample size. That's the easiest way you can do it. And if I increase sample size, I'm probably going to get better results. But it's a startup pilot study that you guys are writing up now. You participated in it. Well, most people, some people didn't do the survey, but most people did. They participated in the research, and I analyzed the research for you. You saw the results. It wasn't ideal, but it's an experience, and it gives you some clues as to what will work and what won't work. So if I were to rejig this study, what could I change? What could I make better? Besides sample size, the gender, obviously gender differences, age differences, maybe socioeconomic status. I mean, there's a bunch of things you can look at. Maybe religion. I don't know. What could make people follow directions? Wear masks. Take things seriously. Politics, of course. There's a lot of political drama over mask wearing, which is kind of silly that everything got politicized. And that's why I do ask a question about politics in here. Because politics do shape the behavior. Politics do shape the vaccination rates. And there are anti-vaxxers, and they will not take any vaccines for a variety of reasons. And is there any way to convince them to get vaccinated? Because if there are too many anti-vaxxers, then we'll never achieve herd immunity. And then people will not be safe from the virus. To some, that's a big problem. To others, I've had people tell me the COVID is like a cold. So why are we wearing masks and why are we distancing and why are we getting vaccinated? It's like a cold. It's like a version of the flu. I've heard that from multiple people. And I don't believe that, obviously. I've taken COVID seriously from the start, just because I knew it killed so many people in China. But people were joking about it, and I couldn't believe it early on. And I know too many people that have died from COVID, so I have to take it seriously. I can't joke about it. But there are people still that they'll never get vaccinated. They're not wearing the masks. They don't believe that it's a dangerous thing. They believe you can treat it, eat healthy, rest up, and you'll be fine. And some people will be fine. Some people will have minimal symptoms, and some people won't. The problem is we do not know who's going to have minimal symptoms and who's going to die from COVID. Obviously, age plays a role. Male gender is at a higher risk than female. But other than that, it's like just kind of, roulette, right? If it comes up on the wrong number, you lose. And if you don't get vaccinated, you also could lose. I know a man in his 70s refused the vaccination. Refused. Said, "I'm not taking this. This is ridiculous. I'm not. We don't even know what we're putting in my body." Refused all vaccinations. Refused social distancing. Took his mask off way too often. And a few weeks ago, he died because he chose not to get the vaccine. So I went to his wake, and it was terrible. And there was an easy solution. To get vaccinated would have saved his life. He chose not to, for whatever reason. He wouldn't listen to any reasoning about it. This was his belief, and that was it. So, can we work on trying to change that maladaptive mindset, that irrationality? Because there are many people that fall into this category that will not social distance, will not wear masks, and will not get vaccinated, and some of them will die from that. And if you're trying to save people's lives, you want to convince them, is there any way we can identify what makes people get vaccinated, what makes people wear masks versus what makes people not wear masks. We know it's political. We know it could be age related. Younger people tend not to wear masks as much. Uh, but it could just, these anti vaxxers, why are they so dug in? Uh, people fear the government, they don't trust the government, all these reasons. So in that last paragraph, you're just going to write all these. What are the implications of the study, and what could you do better to, if you're conducting a future study? There's a lot of limitations, and you can come up with your own limitations too. I gave you some. Come up with some on your own. So it's 4 paragraphs. Once again, I'm going to review these 4 paragraphs. Paragraph 1, restate all the hypotheses I gave you, and state whether you supported or didn't support the hypotheses. Well, we didn't support any of them. That's paragraph 1. Paragraph 2, how do your results relate to previous research, especially the research you studied in the introduction? What were the similarities? What were the differences? Make sure you cite the research that you're referring to in paragraph 2. Paragraph 3, if you fail to support your hypothesis, which we did, explain why. What were the limitations of the study? There's a whole bunch of them. And there were problems with both internal and external validity. And paragraph 4, what are the real world implications of the study? And how would you address the limitations in future research? So that's all you have to do. It's 4 paragraphs. I think it's easier to write than the introduction, but it's still a challenging part to write of the paper. But please do not deviate from this 4 paragraph format. I'm trying to give you a strict format to make it easier on you rather than make it harder. And some people choose not to follow the directions. So your grade is going to rely on you following the directions. Simple as that. If you can't follow directions, you're going to struggle. If you can follow directions and you put a good effort in, you should be fine. If you have questions, you can always reach out to me through email or send me, if you want to meet during my office hours, we can schedule a meeting, whatever works for you. So once you're done with this, you're going to save it as a PDF file. Make sure it's all double spaced, 12-point font, 1-inch margins, and you're going to upload it under the assignments tab in Blackboard where I have discussion. I'll have discussion uploaded. And then you're done. And I will give you feedback like I've done before, and then you will make the revision for the final paper at the end of the course. So once again, if you have any questions, let me know. If not, I will see you online shortly, and good luck with the discussion section.